First of all, I must welcome you to the committee and read the statement about our meeting being recorded. I remind councillors that the public section of this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years as noted on page 4 of the agenda. To those members of the public here today, and I can't see them there, but all care will be taken to maintaining privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is understood your consent is given if your image is inadvertently broadcast. I also remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Right, apologies. I have an apology for committee member Councillor White. Non-committee members, Councillor Neese and Councillor Thurster have also asked for their apologies to be noted. I welcome the councillors here who are not members of the committee itself. You're always very welcome here. Before we start formally, I just want to say that. Okay. Can I have? I'll second it. Okay, I've moved the apologies are received. Bruce, what's your name? Mr. Wallace.
Thanks, David.
Secondly, all those in favour? Right. I just want you all to note that this should be a short meeting today, and I don't in any way mean to shorten the debate, but it is only 6 weeks since we had our last meeting for various reasons. The last meeting was delayed, and therefore the amount of business which has come to this one is reduced. Also, the number of things which should normally be discussed at this meeting, for reasons outside our control, have not come to us, and therefore will be deferred to March. So for that reason, that is why the agenda is so short. I leave it there. Public forum, none has been advised. Items not on the agenda, none advised. Order of business, we are accommodating New Zealand Audit. Leon, you're very welcome. We're bringing that forward to immediately after the previous minutes. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest from the councillors or members of the committee? Thank you. No conflicts. And public excluded business to be transferred to the open. There's none advised. Correct. Right. Okay. Previous minutes. Can I have?
Happy to move. It's correct.
Okay, it's fine. There's just one matter arising, and that is on page 11, where you will see items for staff to follow up. The executive summary got updated by providing clarification of the status of the Regional Coastal Environment Plan, indicated that the plan has been signed off by the Minister of Conservation. I think have you all received this morning? No, okay. All right, so it just says the Regional Coastal Environment Plan became operative in December 2019. At this time, there were two remaining appeals that were discrete matters relating to Matakana and Motiti. The Environment Court provided full and final decisions on these appeals in June 2020, and the Council adopted these remaining parts of the RCEP, and now these two resolved appeals have been referred to the Minister of Conservation for approval, which we expect in the new year. Obviously, there's been a change of minister, and that's why we could have expected it earlier normally, but we confidently expect it will be received in the new year. So that closes that particular matter. Are there any other matters arising? Thank you. Right, we'll move straight on then to page 26. The audit engagement letter of consultation, etc. From Liam. Liam, you're very welcome. Would you like to come up to the table?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I understand we're having a short meeting, so I'm not going to prolong it and keep my bit very short as well. So I take that letter as read because it's included in your pack. if I may refer you to a few things in the letter. The one is the timings, the dates that we've set out and agreed with management. As we will still feel the impact of COVID-19, not only on businesses, but also on audit, there's quite a big possibility that those dates may move. The good news is that the Auditor General has now agreed that council LTPs are high priority for him. So that gives me a little bit of more power when I negotiate resourcing. So we should be okay. The other one is the fee of 85,000. That's in there. That's also in accordance with what he agreed. All councils, the increase of about 7.5% from the previous LTP. That leads to about 2.5% per year. So that's the only other one. I want to draw your attention to the OAG's website, where they've got quite a few bulletins, at the moment 5 of them, on LTPs. I find them really good reading, because we do these things only once every 3 years. I think that's something really good to have a look at. The letter doesn't set out my areas of focus during the LTP, so I thought I'll just give you a rundown of the areas that I would be interested in. And there's basically the 5 C's that they're talking about, and that's is your capital program doable? The condition and performance of critical assets, climate change and how you've addressed that in your consultation document, the impact of COVID-19. I probably should have said COVID-19 impact to keep to the C's. Anyway, and lastly, the consultation document, which will be subject to the same opinion we issued 3 years ago. Now, you've been through the process, so I'm not going to go into too much detail or any further detail. And lastly, of course, we'll look at the 3 waters reform and the impact it will have on the regional council. Thank you for accommodating me.
Thank you, Ian. I only had 2 questions for you, and in fact, you've answered both of them. One of them was just confirmation that you do have the resources to complete the work, to enable us to complete our work on time for the LTP and the annual plan.
Yes.
Thank you. And the second one was just to note the annual fee is 85,000, and I was going to ask you how much was it before, but you've answered that. That it's about a 7% rise. So thank you for that. Are there any questions from around the table? Councillor Crosby.
Morning, Leon, and thank you. Can you just expand a little bit on your view on the content of the consultation document? Your predecessors have had a particular view on that, so I'd be interested in what you'd be looking for in that document.
I think for me, it's about setting out in a reasonable way what you're actually consulting on. Now, remember, this is not the layperson. This is about an informed reader. So I wouldn't expect, with all due respect to my wife, who's very clever, for her to understand everything that's in a consultation document, but at least an informed reader to understand it. And then that must be based on reliable and supportable underlying information.
I think you get to another of the problems we've had previously. Would you object to a side document for the layperson to actually understand, because they're the ones that are actually impacted, not necessarily just an informed reader? And it's a problem we find in our sector, that documents are written in a manner that a lot of people cannot understand, and it puts them off actually coming to grips with a very, very important document. So would you object to some form of side document?
No, not at all. I think it's important because, as you say, and as I said myself, the annual report is also a very important document. I don't think I know too many people who actually read it, because it gets so complicated. So that's why the summary annual report is probably more important to ratepayers, because they can actually understand it better. So now I take your point.
Mr. Robertson.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. I just was wanting to make a question, given I've done it elsewhere. The self-assessment has been completed and sent to Leon?
Through you, Chair, it will be sent to Leon by close of business Friday this week, and it has been completed subject to my review.
No worries, that's fine, thank you. I'm not going to ask Leon what he thinks of it, so that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Mr. Chairman? Through you, Mr. Chairman. This time we have a significant capital and OPEX program which is running in conjunction with two of our neighbouring TLAs. How therefore do you do the assessment of capital program doability and affordability when we are inextricably linked with other funders, including a central government funding agency?
That's a really good question. I didn't anticipate it, but it is something we'll have to look at across the sector. So also looking at what the other councils are doing. I'm also the auditor for Portuguese District Council, and I know they've got a harbour development, and you know, you're putting money in there, and central government's not putting money in there, and how are they actually going to be able to deliver? And that's where if I look at the regional council, and you're getting money as well, and you put forward certain capital projects that's going to happen over the next 10 years. One of the things we found is that if you look at the LTPs in the past, there are also always for capital works that are put up at a certain level, and then you look at the actuals, and it doesn't match that. And it actually makes sense, because if you take all the capital work across the country that all local authorities want to or propose to complete, we don't have enough contractors to do it, never mind money. The money we can probably still get around, but there aren't enough contractors, and it's something we'll probably look at, we'll look at from a sector perspective as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very long answer. Did I answer you?
I think I would have preferred the example to have been given in relation to the Western Bay of Plenty transport system plan and implementation thereof, etc. Right.
So we spoke to Matt about it a week or so ago. So it is on our radar. And again, we'll have to look at, you know, what is the regional council going to do? What's the district council going to do? And how is that interlinked? And how is that actually achievable in the time frame you're putting out? Now, I'm not an engineer, so I'll rely heavily on engineers and asset managers when we do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think, Mr. Totten, that is a really vital question, and one which is going to consume us, I suspect, in the next year. Are there any further questions? Can I have a mover that we receive the report? Robertson seconded. All those in favour? Aye, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Leon. I know you're busy, so on with the auditing.
Thank you.
Right, we now move to page 18, which is the chairperson's report. And Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just referring to this report, as you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, this meeting is 6 weeks after our previous meeting. It's very unusual that we have two meetings so closely together. As you referred to, that related to the delay in our annual report. That item is going to council, we expect, on the 17th of December. So the delay in the October meeting has meant that we've now got a December meeting as well, with a shortened number of items on the report. What the report has in the appendix is the backward-looking appendix that shows which items have come to this committee in the past, and also a forward-looking appendix. I apologise for an incorrect attachment of the appendix that came out with the agenda, and on Stellar Library and circulated by Marinda, we have the actual March and June agenda items that are for your committee's consideration in the new year. So the next half of this financial year, they're the two lists of items we expect to bring to those committees. There's nothing else to add to the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions from around the table? I have none, so can I have a mover that the report be made? Councillor Daddleson, anybody else? Second? Councillor Cook. Excuse me. Councillor Crosby, thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Right, carried. We now move to page 46. One thing I did mean to say is by way of introduction, by the way, whilst I move to page 46, is that we are not having an IT security report at this meeting. But I think in view of the general interest shown by councillors outside this meeting about IT and its various components, that I have asked for at the March meeting, we are going to get a very full report on IT in itself, IT security, the roadmap for the way ahead, and that should be really important. And I would hope that most councillors will attend that, because IT is absolutely the lifeblood of how we do business. Right, now on to page 46, risk for COVID compounded.
Mr. Chair, just before you, talking about IT, I don't see it there in our work program for me.
Mr. Chairman, the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee asked for that at the informal briefing that we had prior to the meeting, so I'll add it to the work programme.
If I may say, Councillor Untitled, we only had that meeting late last night, and therefore, with the best will in the world, and whilst I normally expect staff to work miracles, on this occasion it wasn't possible. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a presentation. I'll just take the report as read and respond to questions, but I would like to draw your attention to page 47, in particular, the list of bullet points there. This Crown funding matches very well with the functions that we seek to deliver anyway. So from a risk perspective, I guess we're doing just more of what we already do. And the list there is quite impressive, I think, just reading through it before. We're getting a lot of work done already. The Kia Kaha project's actually finished now, so that's was 2.1 million over COVID itself, and now we have, I think it's over $30 million worth of funding from the Crown to deliver more work over the next 2 to 4 years. So happy to answer your questions.
Okay, I just want to refer to the bottom of page 47 and the top of page 48. Wild in Pine Control, just under $1 million, and Wallaby Control at just over $1 million. I was quite disappointed to see those figures, but I'm presuming that they should be coupled with these are just extra amounts which we've added to what we are already doing as a council. Is that correct?
Yes, and in fact, the table probably isn't doing justice to the amount of funding, because that's, in the case of the wallabies and the wilding trees, that's only a 1 year worth of funding. In fact, we've got 4 years worth of funding for both of those. So if I had my time again, I would have asked that that be reformatted to include the entire amount of funding. But what I can tell you about that table is we now have signed contracts in all categories. So time has moved on over the last couple of weeks since this was written.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, Chris, slightly out of our field, but with all the funding that's coming into particularly the dock EV space over a 4-year period, have we assessed that there may be any risk when those funds run out that we may actually be called upon to fill some of the gaps left around those schemes, and how do we propose to actually put some resilience into our policy to ensure that doesn't happen?
Yes, it is a risk that's been identified. I'm not sure how much I can say about that, other than there are communications happening with new ministers about that. Possibilities that maybe this funding that has been allocated can be spread out over a long time frame. Those sort of ideas, but at this time we're just talking about it, I think.
Mr. Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. Look, again, I agree. Well done. Good to have some of these numbers here. Just probably a couple of, or one question and one point. I was interested in just the completeness of the co-funding side. Well, not completeness, not suggesting it's wrong, But can you just expand for me the sense around future OPEX, if any, with any associated with these? We have one, the waterways and environment, where you know there is OPEX. I'm just thinking we build something capital, it tends to be OPEX that goes with it. I take it, and this is a struggle for many councils when you get stimulus funding. It's great to have the capital fund, but you've got to think about the dollars that follow. I presume that is allowed for by us and it's not a problem, but I'd like your confirmation, please.
So if it's related to the rivers and drainage schemes, then the river schemes themselves will do the ongoing maintenance, and that's all been built into our asset management plans. If it's related to the environmental side, I think when we enter into an EP agreement, an environmental program agreement with landowners who are receiving fencing or planting work on their land, the agreement states that the landowner must do the maintenance of that fence in perpetuity. So there shouldn't be any ongoing liability to council funding for that. In reality, you sometimes have to help out, but we've been doing this for quite a while, and I think we understand what those implications are.
I wasn't suggesting you don't understand the implications, Chris. I was just keen to make certain, and thank you for that explanation. Look, my one other comment is just, and I will raise in the woodshop, but I think this is an area that I would be keen that we have a risk and 10 eye up, if only because, like the KPO canal, we've got a key partner called the Crown on the other side. And I will make some point later that actually this will be quite an area for internal audit to give us a little bit of assurance that this is a problem. Again, not a reflection that we're all on staff, but just an area of risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. And again, I think you raise a very important point, and one of which we are concerned about. I know the chair is particularly concerned about, in that, of course, we have this funding for emergency funding effectively for 4 years. And thereafter, what happens? Do we let all the programmes slip back and negate what we've actually achieved? And that's something which does come up further in the agenda, so I will leave it to then. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Browning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm well aware through other forums that there are a limited number of contractors that are able to take carry out some of this work, especially around wallaby control, etc. And so there could be a very sort of short resource out there to tap into, which may affect prices unreasonably and create blockages. So are we doing anything about engaging with training and skilling up of people in these areas?
Mr. Inglewood, you would like to comment?
I'll attempt to. I'm not aware of anything in the wallaby space, but I am aware that in the more general environmental enhancement space, that some of the first funding allocated actually by MFE was for a cadetship program, not managed by this council, but by a Bay of Plenty organisation, whose proposal was to train people up so that we have a larger workforce of people with the correct skill sets to do this sort of work. And I'm talking planting and pest control and that sort of thing. Wallaby control may be a bit more specialised, so I'll have to get back to you on that, Councillor.
Through the chair, I could have been having discussions this week in the wallaby space, as I particularly seem to be, and have been what I consider quite reliably informed that there are a number of very experienced people out there who would be very happy to be involved in the wallaby program, but unfortunately the jobs for nature conditions appear to have a high degree of social procurement, so there's a preference to put those programs out through iwi, and that there's a reluctance on some of these professional operators who have had previous experience in that space to engage, and so they would rather be working in a private capacity, but their view is that our regional, because of the funding, that we have no capacity to engage them in it. But there is certainly no shortage of expertise out there with people who want to engage. It's our social procurement policies that are actually preventing that. So I don't know where we go with that, but
It's my understanding, and I may be wrong here, councillor, but my understanding of the social procurement requirements that came with this Crown funding were that you should make all efforts to identify people in the target areas that require employment, but that wasn't a barrier to employing the right people to get the job done, if you know what I mean. So I think we have to go through the loops, the tests.
The gentleman who passed on as probably the guru of New Zealand, possums, wallabies, etc. And he said that if required, he'd be prepared to make a presentation to monitoring ops to explain the position from their point of view. Thought I'd have this discussion with Councillor Winters, and maybe that may be an opportunity to go in a private sector perspective.
I think that's a really important issue, Councillor Clark. We've got to get political correctness out of this. We've got to understand that our primary focus isn't social policy. Our primary focus in this particular respect is in fact control of the wallaby before it gets totally out of hand. So I would hope that that is brought to Councillor Winters. Are you happy that you will be discussing this further in your next meeting? Thank you.
Oh, and through the chair, may I just take a minute out to engage with a brief little story that I've shared with these gentlemen. My wife came home Sunday saying she'd be talking to some people at the local farmers market who were most perturbed that the section that they had bought 2 years ago close to Matata, planted it out with fruit trees, where in fact the fruit was disappearing. They accused the builders last that they were taking the fruit. In fact, they weren't. So they went back at night and said there around the mandarin tree were 3 fine young big wallabies just picking the fruit off the mandarins off the tree and taking them away. So there you go.
Thank you for that little interlude. Councillor Winters, did you wish to? Okay, fine. I just brought your attention to the risk matrix on this particular subject, which starts on page 50, 51, and in particular draw your attention to page 54, where we see the only red score in that area, which is mitigated. I do understand, but as I said earlier, this is an area which we really do have to keep an eye on and have concern on for the future. Are there any other questions or comments on this particular area?
Mr. Chairman, I can't help but comment in relation to Councillor Clark's comments that it seems to me that wallabies may well be the answer to our fruit picking crisis.
Oh dear. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Right, can I have a move, can we receive the report, please? Councillor Donaldson. Mr. Robertson, all those in favour say aye. Aye, carried. Right, internal audit status update, page 56. I've just been made aware that Councillor Neese has joined by Zoom, not a member of the council or of the particular committee, dare I say, but she's very welcome. The more people who attend this meeting, I think the better we are informed we all are. Right, Stephen and Aaron, welcome. Nice to see you again.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning to you. Off you go.
Through you, Chair. So thank you for having us for the meeting. This is our quarterly update in terms of the internal audit status. Like was previously mentioned, it hasn't been that long since we gave our last quarterly update. So I'll take the report as read and just note a couple of things. One is there is a large number of audits that are currently in progress and looking to complete those. And also there has been some good movement in terms of the internal audit recommendations, particularly from the commercial team in terms of finalising and closing a lot of recommendations that have been, some of them outstanding for a fair while in the legislative compliance space. So having that new team on board has shown significant progress in those recommendations. Other than that, I have no questions.
Well, thank you for that. One thing I would say is the one I'm always interested in is on page 58, which is the internal audit follow-up, because the audit is never of any value unless we actually take note and action the various observations which are made. And I'm pleased to say that having reviewed it in detail, we do seem to be making very good progress in that area. What would you like to comment?
No, I have to agree with you. So we are making very good progress, and some of that has been, like I said, the changes that have been made to the various teams have given a lot more emphasis and capacity to close out some of those items. So it's very pleasing to see, having Aaron on board following those up as well, that a number of those items, including a large number of the high items, have been closed in the previous quarter.
Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, thank you. On the same page, on the same chart, and health and safety, what does other mean? We have high, low, medium, and other, which is that?
Yeah, so the health and safety audit was wasn't a control-based audit. It was an improvement-based audit. So all the recommendations that came out through the health and safety audit weren't focused on control weaknesses. They were focused on areas where we could improve the way that we deliver some of the health and safety information and that type of thing. So therefore, they weren't control weaknesses as such. They weren't given a rating of high, medium, or low. They were given another rating because these were areas where we could extend ourselves. And KPMG said at the time that these were a long-term project, and they recommended coming back in 3 to 5 years to see where we were in terms of that health and safety journey.
Follow-up. So how do we measure other? I don't think this is an appropriate way of defining anything other. So we need some kind of way to measure improvement.
So we can look at that in terms of how we define that in the future, of course.
I think in the past, given the importance of health and safety, we have had a separate and special report on health and safety. And if it doesn't fit in this matrix, let's take it outside this matrix and let's give it its full importance and have a separate report, and where you can describe the actual where we are and where we're going to.
We could certainly do that for the next meeting.
Thank you. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Crosby? Good. Thank you. Right. Any further questions? Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if you could just explain what work is being done around the policy framework area.
Yeah, certainly. So we had a meeting with KPMG late last year, and they recommended that as part of our internal audit program, we reviewed our policy framework to see if it was fit for purpose and to see whether it encompassed all the policies that should be in place are in place, and that those are communicated correctly across the organisation. So the policy framework review is to do that, is to look at what our framework is in terms of the policies within the council, to make sure that we have those policies and are fit for purpose across the board. So it's an overall framework review in terms of, do we have the right policies in place at the right level and giving the staff the right training in terms of those policies to make sure that they're being implemented correctly.
A supplementary, if I may, are you talking about policies general right across the entire functions of this organisation?
Yeah, so the policies that relate mainly to the internal operations of the council, so they're things like the conflict of interest policy, the fraud policy, health and safety policy, so they're the internal policies rather than policies looking outwardly to the community, I guess.
Thank you.
I hope that satisfies you, Councillor Thompson, that we haven't got the eagle eye on you. Mr. Robson.
Stephen, just and it's probably I'm asking you to remind me, the consent process work that is just still scheduled, or is there some reason we haven't got cracking on that?
No, it's still scheduled. It's just in terms of priority, in terms of obviously there's a large number of audits, and so that was just in terms of the workflow.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. That's what I thought. Thank you.
No further questions, so I'd just like to thank both of you for the sterling work you do in this area. I think it's a vital part of what we need to do in controlling our risks on the council, so well done and thank you. Can I have a mover, please, for accepting the report? Councillor Clark, seconded. Mr. Robertson, all those in favour say aye. Carried. Right, we have now got to the public schools, so can we now please stop the recording?